Good morning. Today we look at First Peter chapter 3. Yeah, uh, Peter starts out with words that are going to get him in trouble in today's society. Uh, wives in the same way accept the authority of your husbands, and marriage is much more a partnership. It isn't a one-sided deal. And then when you get down into verse 7, when he talks about husbands in the same way honor your wives, the weaker sex, I beg to differ. I'm sorry, Peter, but I don't see it that way. Uh, but anyway, going back to the first part, it's accept the authority of your husband. However, he's talking to faithful women that believe in Jesus, and saying to them that because they believe and because of other reasons, hopefully, maybe their husbands will come to believe because of that. And it's just a reminder for all of us, I think, that we are witnesses and that we are examples and that people are watching. And that's people are watching is one of the important things to always remember, that they watch, they see who we are, they see how we act, and all of those things that way. And it's a reminder of, they'll know we are Christians by our love. And sometimes, do they really? I mean, or can they see that we are Christians by our love? Um, but he's talking about being an example. He says, to obey your husbands so that they may be won over without a word by their wife's conduct. And it is. It's just, we are what we live. We are what we do. It's people are much more apt to do what we do rather than to do what we say if we're doing something totally different. You know that saying, of course you do. And then in that verse 7, when it says, husbands, show consideration your wives in your life together, and I think that is a part of, not taking advantage, not ruling over them, but honoring them as an equal. And in many ways, there are women are superior in different parts. I mean, they just do some things better than we men do, and that's just one of the facts that is true. Um, there's they make life complete. They really do. Anyway, uh, and then verse 8. Finally, have unity of spirit, sympathy, and love for one another. A tender heart, and a humble mind. And it's to live that life of unity, to work together for the good of all. And after verse 21 in here, I've got written one for all and all for one. It isn't just everybody for himself, but it's working together. And that's the one for all for one. This is the Three Musketeers model, I believe, for dating myself a little bit more there, but to have unity of spirit, sympathy and love for one another. And he says, don't repay evil for evil or abuse for abuse. On the contrary, repay with a blessing. And that's how we show we are Christians, by our love, to be gracious, to be merciful, to be welcoming, even when we may feel the opposite from someone else. And then as he's talking there, he quotes from Psalm 34, those who desire a good life and desire to see good days, let them keep their tongue silent, their lips from speaking, and it's just a reminder for me that, these early disciples that Jesus chose knew the Hebrew Scriptures. They were good Jewish people and faithful Jewish people. And Jesus had come, to be the Messiah for the people that God had chosen, these Jewish people. And, and they didn't know all of the scriptures. They didn't know, but they knew what they were. They knew, and they quoted and they referred to Jesus in those prophecies and encouraging others to live by what the scriptures say. And that's one of the things that we do yet today is we use scripture, and all scripture is useful for reproof, for correction, for training in righteousness. And it is. I mean, we use Scripture to encourage others and to point out the law, but also to lead to the grace. And this is kind of what Peter is talking about here too, is to, to not to be just subordinate, but to be supportive and to be encouraging and to be working together. And in verse 18, Peter writes, "For Christ suffered for sins once for all," and that's where I have the one for all and all for one written in kind of with that. But he died once for all people. And, he doesn't have to die again every day. And that was or once a year even, or, once a decade, but one time for all. And that's, in just a couple of verses, he talks about baptism here. And baptism is once for your lifetime. And we don't need to be rebaptized, because once we have been baptized, we are that person. But with the Holy Communion, we continue that way. But anyway, Jesus died once for all, the righteous for the unrighteous, in order to bring you to God. I mean, it doesn't say all, it doesn't say people, but it says to bring you to God. And that's personal, right? That Jesus died for you. This was what Peter's saying, and reminding people. He died once for all, the righteous for the unrighteous, in order to bring you to God. And he was put to death in the flesh, but made alive in the spirit. So he died for me. He died for you. And you can say that too. He died for me. And this is what we believe, that he died for each and every one of us, for us and our salvation. And then in verse 20, he talks about, that we've been made whole because people, weren't accepting God. But he says, when God waited patiently in the days of Noah during the building of the ark, in which a few, that is 8 persons, were saved. And, think about that. Noah building the ark. It didn't just take a day or two. It took a long time. And I read something just the other day about it was a Japanese study of the ark and of its construction, and how it was the right length, that, it couldn't be wrecked easily by the waves. It was the right width and the right depth in the water, so that it wouldn't roll over and tip over. It was one of the most seaworthy ships ever made. And of course, God would know how to make it that way, right? But, so he waited while the ark was built, and then it says, the 8 persons were saved through the water, which prefigures baptism. And we read that in the Bible every once in a while. And he says, now, baptism, which this prefigured, Noah and the ark, has saved you. And, you can be baptized and you can walk away from your faith. So it isn't, it's just not an automatic, but because if it was an automatic and we just threw everything into that category, that, it doesn't matter what else you do, but I think it does. We need to trust, we need to believe it, but it still doesn't put the ownership on us. We have been baptized into Christ, we've been saved by grace, and because of that, we hopefully live lives that reflect the love of God that way. And then the last thing in this chapter, talking about Jesus, who has gone into heaven and is at the right hand of the Father, with the angels, authorities, and powers made subject to him. So Jesus is back on the throne, where he was in the beginning and where he will be forever.